Hello everybody. Today in our class we shall discuss about the chemical regulation of respiration. To understand this chemical regulation process, we should know what are the chemical components that are actually modulate the respiratory process. These are the hypoxia or the decrease in the partial pressure of the oxygen. This is the one thing. Second is that increase in the hydrogen ion concentration, that is the increase H plus ion or increase proton concentration, or we can say decrease in the pH of the arterial blood. And third important thing is that increase in the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide, that is the increase PCO2. So these are the three chemical components which actually regulate the chemical process of the respiratory system. Now next, what you should know that few important structure and the components of the central nervous system related with this chemical regulation of the respiration. To have this idea, we should draw first a schematic diagram like this one, where this is a box. We can divide this whole box into two halves, one for the pontine area and another for the medullary area. In the pontine area, we have two important structures. One is the upper part and one is the lower part. Here in the medullary area, we have few important structures related with our chemical regulation of the respiration. These are what? These are the first one. Second one is that here. Third one is our this part. And of course, we have another part in this medullary area. This is our this part. So if you label all this area, what are the names of that area? This lower upper part, I have already told, this is the pontine area, and this part is the medullary area. And here it is the ventral part of the pontomedullary area, and it is the dorsal part of the pontomedullary area. This box can be denoted as nucleus of Tractus solitarius. Here it is our central chemoreceptor, and it is of course our blood brain barrier. And here we can say it is the P Board-Ginger complex, that is the central gram generator. In the pons area, though they are not take part in the chemical regulation of the respiration, but for our understanding purpose, we should know the upper pontine area related with the neural regulation of the respiration mainly. These are the pneumotaxic center or the off switch of the respiratory center and the apneustic center, lower part of the pons. That is the on switch of the respiratory center. Now, some important internal communication between the nucleus of Tractus solitarius and the P-Board-Ginger complex, we should know. What are those? From the nucleus of Tractus solitarius, the internal communication first goes to which part? This is the caudal ventrolateral medulla. From there, it will reach up to the rostral ventrolateral medulla, and from there ultimately it will send its signal to the P-Board-Ginger complex. Now, what are the chemical components that are released from the nucleus of Tractus solitarius? That we should know. But before that, another important structure I forgot to tell, in this medullary area we have, this is this box. And what actually name of this box? Here it is the nucleus ambiguous, and this nucleus ambiguous actually the central nucleus area for the vagus nerve, or the vagal efferent actually generate from this nucleus of the ambiguous. Now, nucleus of Tractus solitarius also have a common direct communication with the nucleus ambiguous. Now, what are the chemical components or the neurotransmitters that are released from these areas? So, nucleus of Tractus solitarius always released the excitatory neurotransmitter, that is the glutamate. that is the glutamate. Here also the glutamate will released, and caudal ventrolateral medulla always after getting stimulated, it will release the inhibitory neurotransmitter, that is the gamma amino butyric acid, that is the GABA, gamma amino butyric acid. Rostral ventrolateral medulla, if it is stimulated, it will release always the glutamate again, which is of course the excitatory neurotransmitter. Now, suppose if there will be direct stimulation of the nucleus of Tractus solitarius, more amount of the glutamate will release from this nucleus of Tractus solitarius, which actually stimulate the caudal ventrolateral medulla. Now, if CVLM will be stimulated more, it will release more GABA. And GABA, as it is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, it will actually inhibit the rostral ventrolateral medulla. So, rostral ventrolateral medulla, due to the inhibition effect, it will release less amount of the glutamate, and finally, P-Bodija complex cannot be stimulated. On the other hand, if you think that there will be less release of the glutamate due to any reason, the CBLM will be less stimulated, and that will lead to less release of the GABA. Whereas if as the GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, due to less concentration of the GABA, thus RVLM will not be inhibited, or rather it will be disinhibited, or we can say it will be stimulated. And due to stimulatory effect, it will release more glutamate, and subsequently PVC will be stimulated and more ramp will be generated. On the other hand, if there will be increase of the release of the glutamate from the NTS, directly nucleus ambiguous will be stimulated. And if nucleus ambiguous will be stimulated, it will directly stimulate the vagal efferent nerve, which actually carry which type of neurotransmitter, that is the acetylcholine. So nucleus of ambiguous will always release which neurotransmitter? We can say it is the acetylcholine, and which actually carried by the 10th cranial nerve efferent. So these are the central internal communication by which nucleus of Tractus solitarius actually communicate with the PVC. On the other hand, for our understanding purpose, though it is not related to the chemical regulation of the respiration, the pneumotaxic center, as it is an off center, it actually inhibits the P-Bodginger complex, and this apneustic center has a stimulatory effect of the P-Bodginger complex, that you should know. And they, in between the pneumotaxic center and the apneustic center, there are reciprocal innervation, where pneumotaxic center tries to diminish the effect of the apneustic center, whereas apneustic center always tries to inhibit the pneumotaxic action. But there are always check and balance mechanism actually operating, where the pneumotaxic center is the predominant than the apneustic center. So this is the overall the central communication of the respiratory system. Now, to understand the peripheral chemoreceptor, which is outside the central nervous system, we should know what are the important structures under the peripheral chemoreceptors. So to understand this thing, we have to draw a schematic diagram here. This is the arch of aorta, or the aortic arch, where first subclavian artery will form, and subsequently it will produce the common carotid effect, common carotid artery, and it actually bifurcate into internal and external carotid artery. So in between the bifurcation of the common carotid artery, here we have one chemoreceptor. Here we have one chemoreceptor. This is known as the carotid body in between the bifurcation of the common carotid artery. And within the arch of aorta, we have another chemoreceptor, peripheral chemoreceptor, which is termed as the aortic body. Now, both this carotid body and aortic body actually function in a similar way, and they both all have the specialized types of cell, that is the glomus cell, glomus type 1 and glomus type 2 cells. Glomus 1 cell actually the main cell which actually regulate the chemical regulation process, whereas glomus type 2 cell is the supporting cell, and it actually give the nutritional support, as well as during the any injury, it can produce or it can replenish the glomus 1 cell. So it has actually stem cell effect. Now, this carotid body and aortic body both are sensitive to few chemical substances. Like if there will be decreased PO2 or there will be increase in the hydrogen ion concentration. But most typically, the carotid body is more stimulated when there will be hypobaric hypoxia or decreased arterial oxygen pressure, arterial partial pressure of the oxygen. And this aortic body is more sensitive to the dissolved oxygen. The dissolved oxygen concentration is how much in our blood? It is the 0.03 ml per TL. So if suppose it will reduce in such a tiny amount, like slightly less than 0.3, suppose it is if it is 0.27, 0.22, then also the aortic body can be stimulated. Whereas if the partial pressure of the oxygen will fall below 70 millimeter of mercury, then the carotid body can sense and start its action. So how this glomus one cell actually sense when there will be reduction in the partial pressure of the oxygen or there will be increase in the hydrogen ion concentration. But most typically the hydrogen ion concentration increment can be sensed by the carotid body, not by the aortic body. Because of the heavy blood flow, the research is actually still going on for the aortic body, how actually it operates. But to some extent, both carotid body and aortic body will operate in the same way. Now, how glomus cell 1 actually start its action? When there will be hypoxia, if there will be decrease in the dissolved oxygen concentration, or in case of high altitude, when you are going to the high altitude area and the partial pressure of the oxygen will be dropped down, and hypobaric hypoxia is going on. At that situation, the carotid body will sense, and how they actually send its signal via the glomus cell 1. Actually, glomus cell 1 has a specialized type of oxysensitive potassium ion. So if there will be hypoxia is going on, oxysensitive potassium ion actually, potassium channel will actually close, and that will lead to decrease in the potassium ion efflux, decrease potassium ion efflux. Now this decrease potassium ion efflux will lead to increased amount of the potassium ion concentration within the cell, and that will lead to depolarization of the glomus type 1 cell. Now depolarization effect will lead to what? They will produce the, or they will create the more influx of the calcium ion via the voltage gated calcium channel. So increased calcium ion influx will occur within the cell, and we know from our earlier knowledge that exocytosis actually occur when there will be high calcium ion concentration, and via the docking, priming, and fusion effect, the vesicle actually released, which actually have several types of neurotransmitter like dopamine, acetylcholine, ATP. But from the Ganong's review of medical physiology book, we can say that the most effective neurotransmitter that is released from the glomus type 1 cell is the dopamine. So dopamine is actually released via the exocytosis, and this dopamine actually work on the dopamine D2 receptor, which actually present on the 9th and 10th cranial nerve nuclear nerve ending, which are actually generated from the carotid body, from the 9th cranial nerve, and the aortic body. So this is the carotid body where actually the 9th cranial nerve will arise, and or the glossopharyngeal nerve will arise, and the aortic body will arise the 10th cranial nerve. So from here, the D2 receptors are present at the nerve endings of the 9th and 10th cranial nerve, and D2 receptor is such a type of receptor which is actually G protein coupled receptor and has action similar with the G alpha inhibitory effect. So due to this G alpha inhibitory effect, there will be less impulse will generate from the D2 receptor, and the negative impulse rather will carry forward by the via the 9th and 10th cranial nerve, 9th and 10th cranial nerve nuclei, and nerve fibers. And this 9th and 10th cranial nerve fiber ultimately reach up to which area? That is the nucleus of Tractus solitarius. So from our previous knowledge, we can say, though as it is a inhibitory signal or inhibitory impulse, so NTS will not be stimulated, rather it will be inhibited. So if it will inhibit, then it will release less amount of the glutamate from the nucleus of Tractus solitarius. So decreased glutamate release will lead to decreased excitement of the caudal ventrolateral medulla. So CBLM will be rather inhibited. Now, if CBLM will be inhibited, there will be less release of the gamma amino butyric acid. Now, gamma amino butyric acid, if it is reduced in amount, then it will not be inhibit the rostral ventrolateral medullary area. So rather, we can say it will be stimulated due to less effect of the GABA, and subsequently there will be increased release of the glutamate. So increased glutamate release from the RBLM ultimately stimulate the P-Bolginger complex, which is the central RAM generating area, and ultimately more respiratory ramp will be generated and respiratory drive will be increased. So increased ventilation effect will lead to decreased washout of the hypoxic situation, and the acidotic situation also be diminished. So decrease, so hypoxia will be normalized. Hypoxia will be normalized, and the acidotic situation also be normalized. Hypoxia will be corrected. Hypoxia will be corrected. So this is the process by which actually the Lomas type 1 cell operates. Now here one thing you have to understand, that this hypoxia are of two types. If it will be so hypoxia means the hypobaric hypoxia, not the anemic hypoxia. So hypoxic hypoxia or the hypobaric hypoxia are the stimulating agent which actually stimulate the Lomas type 1 cell, not the anemic hypoxia. That means if suppose your hemoglobin will be reduced from the 15 milligram per dl to 10 gram per dl, and you think that your baroreceptor, peripheral chemoreceptors will be stimulated. No, it is not exactly occur. So if on the other hand, if there will be decrease in the partial pressure of the oxygen due to high altitude effect or the hypoxic situation, and it will be around less than 70 millimeter of mercury, then only your peripheral chemoreceptor will be stimulated. So this is the one thing. And second, the dissolved oxygen is the only agent which actually stimulates the aortic body or the peripheral chemoreceptor. So these are the two clinical entity related to this effect. Now come to the hydrogen ion concentration. As I have already told that hydrogen ion actually increased during the, in case of metabolic acidosis. We can say in case of metabolic acidosis, hydrogen ion can be increased, or we can say in case of respiratory acidosis also, we can have the increased hydrogen ion concentration. But in this case, due to increase in the hydrogen ion concentration in the metabolic acidosis early part, this hydrogen ion increment can be sensed by the carotid body mainly, and this carotid body ultimately increase ventilatory drive, so that the hypoxic situation or the acidotic situation will be washed away. And this is the one thing. Second is that in case of respiratory acidosis, not only the increase in the hydrogen ion concentration is there, but also there will be increase in the PCO2. So there will be increase in the PCO2 also lead to some effect of the carotid body, but major effect will occur in the central chemoreceptor. So central chemoreceptor will work how, that we need to understand here from the previous diagram. So here you can say that when there will be increase in the PCO2 concentration, then PCO2 concentration increment will lead to increased carbon dioxide presence, and as the carbon dioxide can dissolve the through the blood-brain barrier or the lipid soluble, that is the thing by which the carbon dioxide can easily pass through the blood-brain barrier. And in the brain interstitium, we have the water. So this CO2 and water ultimately react with each other and will produce what? This is a reversible reaction, and it will produce hydrogen ion and the bicarbonate ion. Now, this hydrogen ion increment now actually trigger the central chemoreceptor. And this central chemoreceptor, if it will be stimulated, it will produce what? It will directly stimulate the P-Purkinje complex, and this P-Purkinje complex will produce increased ramp generator. So increased ventilatory drive will lead to increased wash out of the carbon dioxide, and the hypercapnic situation will be corrected. Now, in this case, the important clinical thing is that, or clinical entity we can say, is that in case of chronic bronchitis, in case of chronic bronchitis, there will be hypoxia and the hypercapnic situation is there, and the hypercapnic situation and the hypoxia will be there. So due to longer effect of the chronic bronchitic situation, this hypercapnic, that means the increase in the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide, cannot stimulate the central chemoreceptor eventually. That means central chemoreceptor will become insensitive to increase in the PCO2 level, and that will lead to only the triggering effect of the hypoxia or the decreased partial pressure of the oxygen. And due to this effect, this hypoxic situation ultimately continue its respiratory drive in case of chronic bronchitis or the COPD patient. So this decreased PO2 ultimately stimulate the peripheral chemoreceptor and subsequently it will increase the ventilatory drive. Now, suppose if a patient will come to you with an acute exacerbation of the COPD or an acute case of the chronic bronchitis, and you give the large amount of the moist oxygen to the patient, then immediately, if there will be washout of the hypoxic condition, then what will happen? The respiratory center will be depressed. So central ramp generator will ultimately central ramp generator will ultimately uh, what will happen? It will be depressed. So as a result of this, there will be cessation of respiration or the stoppage of the respiratory system, and the respiratory rate will be zero, and finally patient will be die. So that's how if a patient will come to you with the acute exacerbation of the COPD patient, don't give the moist oxygen inhalation in a fast way, or you should give a slow moist oxygen inhalation, that is around 1 to 3 liter per minute spread by the face mask, so that the hypoxic drive should be there, so that the ventilation can continue. So these are all about our chemical regulation of the respiration process. Now, next thing is that we should have idea about such receptors which are present in our respiratory system. These are the pulmonary stretch receptor. These are the pulmonary stretch receptor. Pulmonary stretch receptor. This is one thing. Then the juxtacapillary receptor, JCR. Third one is that irritant receptor, and fourth one is that mechanoceptor. Mechanoceptor. So what are those and where they are exactly situated? These pulmonary stretch receptors are situated where? It is situated in the smooth muscle of the respiratory system. Smooth muscles of the respiratory system. Juxtacapillary receptor is situated at the alveolo-capillary junction. Alveolo-capillary junction. Irritant receptor are present intraepithelial area. So within the epithelial cell of the respiratory lining, intraepithelium, we have the irritant receptor, and mechanoceptors are situated in the thoracic cage, and the locomotor system. So thoracic cage and the locomotor system. All the locomotor system joints, we have the uh, mechanoceptors. Now, how pulmonary stretch receptor will actually operate? And it is related with our Hering-Breuer inflation reflex, which is very important to understand that Hering-Breuer inflation reflex is what. Now again, we have to draw the diagram of the respiratory system previously that I have already drawn here. So suppose this is our central nervous system area, and here of course we have the pontine area and the medullary area. In the pontine area, we have the pneumotaxic center and the apneustic center, and here we have the, in the medullary area, we have the nucleus of Tractus solitarius, the central chemoreceptor zone. This is the blood-brain barrier, and it is our pre-Purkinje complex or the central ramp generator. And here, as I have not drawn earlier, these structures are like nucleus ambiguous. Of course, it is there, and another structure is there at the dorsal part of the medulla. It is the ventral respiratory group. Similarly, dorsal respiratory group is also there, just adjacent to the NTS or nucleus of tractus solitarius. This is the dorsal respiratory group. So again, you have to write down the names of that areas. So this is the pneumotaxic center. This is the apneustic center. This is the central RAM, central chemoreceptor, and this is of course the blood-brain barrier. It is the pre-Purkinje complex. It is the nucleus ambiguous part, and it is the ventral respiratory group, and it is the dorsal respiratory group of neuron, nucleus of tractus solitarius. Now, what will happen when there will be increased stretch in the smooth muscle during the exercise, or if there will be increase in the tidal volume more than 3 times than the normal? So more than 3 times normal the tidal volume, that is that if tidal volume will reach more than 150, 1050, 500 ml, or the 1500 ml of the air will passing through the respiratory system, that is the tidal volume, during the exercise, this stretch receptor will be stimulated, and afferent signal will carry forward via the 10th afferent. So 10th afferent will generate from the stretch receptors. Pulmonary stretch receptor will stimulate, and they will send signal via the 10th afferent nerve, and this 10th afferent nerve ultimately will reach at which area? It will actually reach at the nucleus of the tractus solitarius. Now, from the nucleus of the tractus solitarius, it will send its signal to which areas? It will first send its signal to the nucleus ambiguous. Now, here you have to understand that the ventral respiratory group and the dorsal respiratory group function. So this VRG and DRG will be stimulated only during the exercise, not in normal circumstances. And when DRG will be stimulated, this DRG or dorsal respiratory group actually help to contract the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles. Whereas the ventral respiratory group actually have the two parts. One is the cranial part and one is the caudal part. So cranial part is related for the contraction of the internal intercostal muscle, and the caudal part will be related with the contraction of the other accessory muscle like the abdominal rectus abdominis or the scalenis, like that. So these are only operating during the exercise situation, not in the normal circumstances. So when they're during the exercise, your tidal volume will be more than 1500 ml, or the more than 3 times the tidal volume, the stretch receptor will be stimulated, and 10th afferent will send its signal from the stretch receptor to the nucleus of tractus solitarius. Now, this nucleus of tractus solitarius, as it is stimulated, then it will send its positive signal via the glutamate to the nucleus ambiguous. Now, nucleus ambiguous will release what neurotransmitter? It will release actually the acetylcholine. Now, this acetylcholine ultimately inhibit this ventral respiratory group. It will inhibit the ventral respiratory group. So this ventral respiratory group will be inhibited. On the other hand, this 10th cranial nerve directly stimulate the pneumotaxic center. They also stimulate the pneumotaxic center. Now, pneumotaxic center, when it will be stimulated, as it is an off center of the respiratory system, it will inhibit first the pre-Purkinje complex, and as well as pneumotaxic center also inhibit another part, that is the dorsal respiratory group. Dorsal respiratory group of the neuron. Now, this dorsal respiratory group, as it is related with the contraction of the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscle, so inhibition of the dorsal respiratory group also lead to decrease or the stoppage of the contraction of the dorsal respiratory of the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscle, whereas the inhibition of the ventral respiratory group also lead to cessation of the contraction of the accessory group of muscle, and also the inhibition of the pre-Purkinje complex also related to the decrease in the central RAM generator. Eventually, these three things will lead to what? Decrease the inspiratory time and increase the respiratory drive. So together, these three effects will what? They will actually decrease the inspiratory time. Inspiratory time will be decreased, and second is that increase respiratory rate. or respiratory drive will be more, so that more oxygen will be entered in our body. So this is our Hering-Breuer reflex. That means lung will operate always at the low lung volume, or if it is pressure volume curve of the lung or the respiratory system, then we can say that this lung will operate always at the steep part of the curve. So this is all about our Hering-Breuer reflex, inflation reflex, where the due to more inflation of the respiratory system during the severe exercise, it will actually inhibit the, or it will actually decrease the inspiratory time, and respiratory rate or respiratory drive will be more, and that will lead to more uh, amount of oxygen to come inside the lung, and lung will operate at the steep part of the curve. Lung will operate at the steep part of the curve of the which curve, of the pressure volume curve of the respiratory system. And same thing will occur during the Hering-Breuer, or the reverse thing will occur in case of Hering-Breuer deflation reflex. So Hering-Breuer deflation reflex is the exactly the opposite thing, where lung will operate actually at which part of the curve, it will actually operate at the flat part of the curve. So this is all about our pulmonary stretch receptor. Second thing is that the J reflex, or the juxtacapillary reflex. So here is our alveoli, and here is the capillary area. So this alveolo-capillary junction, we have the J receptor, or the juxtacapillary receptor. During the exercise, due to heavy blood flow, this J receptor will be stimulated, and this J receptor during the exercise, due to heavy blood flow, they will actually trigger this J receptor. From the J receptor, the myelinated afferent of the vagus nerve, 10th afferent of the myelinated fiber will actually arise and send its signal to the nucleus of the tractus solitarius. Now, nucleus of tractus solitarius, as it will stimulate via the 10th afferent nerve, they will produce what? They, after getting stimulated via the 10th afferent nerve, they will release more amount of the glutamate, and this glutamate will be doing what? They will actually stimulate the caudal ventrolateral medulla. This caudal ventrolateral medulla stimulation will lead to increased release of the gamma amino butyric acid, and this gamma amino butyric acid will actually inhibit the rostral ventrolateral medulla. Now, this rostral ventrolateral medulla decrement or inhibition will lead to decreased release of the glutamate. Here, if glutamate will be released less, they will not stimulate the intermediolateral horn, and this intermediolateral horn actually produce the postganglionic sympathetic nerve release, and this postganglionic sympathetic normally release what? This release actually norepinephrine. Now, if there will be decreased glutamate, there will be inhibition of the intermediolateral medulla, and eventually the norepinephrine will release less. So this norepinephrine will work at which area? Number one, it will work on the blood vessels. So blood vessels will be dilated. There will be less norepinephrine. There will be vasodilatation. Number one. Number two, it will work on the heart. So when it will work on the heart on the beta 1 adrenergic receptor, this less concentration of the norepinephrine will lead to two things. Number one, decrease is contractile effect. So decreased contraction of the heart will lead to decrease in the cardiac output. And second thing is that also decreased contractile effect on the heart will lead to decrease in the heart rate. So decrease in the eventually will lead to decrease in the blood pressure. So these two things will definitely be occurred in case of J reflex. That means one is the decrease in the heart rate, and decrease in the blood pressure will occur. Second thing is that if there will be less norepinephrine, there will be less conversion of the norepinephrine to epinephrine. So epinephrine concentration will be reduced. This epinephrine normally work on the skeletal muscle blood vessels. So skeletal muscle blood vessels will be dilated. So normally, if due to action of the epinephrine, so more amount of blood actually flowing to the skeletal muscle. But if there will be decrease in the epinephrine concentration, this skeletal muscle will not work properly because of the less blood supply to the skeletal muscle, and they will become relaxed. So skeletal muscle laxity or relaxedness will occur. Another thing will occur, that is that if there will be decreased amount of the glutamate will release from the RVLM, they will do what? They will actually stimulate the pre-Purkinje complex. So pre-Purkinje complex will also be inhibited. And as a result of this, if there will be inhibition of the pre-Purkinje complex, what will happen? There will be decrease in the ramp generator. So decrease in the ramp, or we can say sudden apnea will occur. Sudden apnea will occur followed by hyperventilation. So these are the effect of the J reflex. So J reflex finally will do what? They will actually, number one, decrease the heart rate. Number two, decrease the blood pressure. Third one, skeletal muscle blood vessels will be relaxed, or skeletal muscle will be relaxed, or there will be laxity of the skeletal muscle. Number three, and number four, there will be sudden occurrence of the apnea followed by hyperventilation. Followed by hyperventilation. So these are the effect of the J reflex. Again, we can write down the juxtacapillary reflex. What are the final effect? There will be decrease in the heart rate. Number one, there will be decrease in the blood pressure. Number two, number three, skeletal muscle relaxation will occur. Skeletal muscle relaxation will occur. And number four, first, there can be occurrence of the apnea due to cessation of the ramp generation, and followed by hyperventilation. Followed by hyperventilation will occur. So this is all about our J reflex, or the juxtacapillary reflex. Third one is that we have another receptor, that is the irritant receptor, which is present within the epithelial cell. In the epithelium, due to any irritation or the pollen grain or the chemical components, if they are irritated, they actually stimulated, and this stimulation will produce action potential, which actually carried by the unmyelinated afferent of the 10th cranial nerve. Unmyelinated afferent of the 10th cranial nerve. So unmyelinated afferent of the 10th cranial nerve eventually will reach at which area? At the nucleus of the tractus solitarius. Now, nucleus of the tractus solitarius, if it will be stimulated, it will release more amount of the glutamate, and finally this glutamate ultimately stimulate which area? Nucleus of the ambiguous, which is the 10th afferent center, and from there release of which chemical substance via the 10th efferent, that is the acetylcholine, which actually carried by the vagal efferent component. Now this acetylcholine ultimately will work at which area? That is the epithelial area, which we have the bronchioles. We have the M3 muscarinic receptor. This M3 muscarinic receptor, when work on the acetylcholine, they will actually constrict the bronchus, or the bronchoconstriction effect will occur. So this bronchoconstriction will ultimately produce the cough reflex. First, you will take the deep inspiration, followed by rapid exhalation in a closed glottis area. And due to this rapid exhalation process, your glottic will open, and suddenly the pollen grain will come out as a cough reflex. So this cough reflex will, when it will occur, there will be the intrathoracic pressure increment up to 300 centimeter per H2O pressure. The intrathoracic pressure can be there, and also the air that is coming out during the cough, its velocity is almost around 900 kilometer per hour. So this is all about our irritant receptor. And finally, we have the mechanoceptor, and this mechanoceptor will operate via the mechanoceptors are operate via the several muscle spindles. Some of the muscle spindles can sense the velocity of the shortening of the muscle fiber, Second type of muscle spindle can sense the initial length of the static length of the muscle fiber, static length of the muscle fiber, and Golgi tendon organ is also there, which actually can sense the rate of contraction of the muscle fiber, Now, during the respiration process, suppose if anyhow this respiration will not occur properly, they can sense this thing, and finally they will increase its discharge via the gamma motor neuron. So this gamma motor neuron ultimately can correct the contraction of the thoracic cage, and respiration can be normalized. And still, due to some diseases like the pulmonary fibrosis or the pulmonary edema, like this thing, when there will be less contractile effect of the muscle fibers of the thoracic cage, then via the gamma motor neuron, the contraction will not be corrected, and through the gamma, there will be alpha gamma linkage will occur, and via the alpha gamma linkage, they will start increase firing of the muscle fiber via the alpha motor neuron, So by this alpha motor neuron, finally the deficiency of the contraction effect of the muscle will be corrected, and finally the respiration can be normalized, respiration can be restored, or respiration can be normalized. So these are the few effects of the mechanoceptors, and they actually occur under normal circumstances during the exercise situation. So these are all about our respiratory system chemical regulation. Now, important factors related with the CO2 narcosis. Sometimes, from our knowledge, we can understand that when there will be increase in the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide, the central chemoreceptor will be stimulated, and there will be increased RAM generator. But it will not occur for a long time. If the carbon dioxide concentration in the arterial blood will be more than 7%, or if the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide in case of acute situation will be more than 70 millimeter of mercury, or in case of chronic situation, acute situation, or in case of chronic situation, if it will be more than 90 millimeter of mercury in case of chronic bronchitis like situation, all these things will produce the depression of the central chemoreceptor. So central chemoreceptor will become insensitive, and therefore they cannot stimulate the pre-Purkinje complex, and cessation of respiration will occur. So decreased RAM generator, and this is known as the CO2 narcosis. In which situation this can be occurred? Number one, if there will be respiratory center depression due to any case of any injury or spinal cord injury, or in case of Guillain-Barré syndrome like situation, or if you will take the barbiturates or opioids poisoning, barbiturates or opioid type poisoning. Number two, if there will be VYQ mismatch occur, VYQ mismatch will occur. And number three, if there will be increase your BMR, like in case of thyrotoxicosis or in case of fever. So under these circumstances, there will be CO2 narcosis will occur. And how they can be treated? Of course, you have to give the supplemental oxygen, supplemental O2 inhalation, supplemental O2 inhalation should be there. Number one. Number two, you can start non-invasive positive pressure ventilation you can give, and pulmonary rehabilitation you can do, pulmonary exercise, or we can say pulmonary rehabilitation we can do. So these are all about our CO2 narcosis and also the whole process of the chemical regulation of the respiration. Hope you will enjoy this, or you learn this tutorial, some new things from the tutorial session. Thank you.